Welcome to Talk, Teach and Learn, an Edtech podcast brought to you by Firefly Learning, the trusted platform for whole school engagement, helping schools deliver a unified school experience. Firefly offers schools a way to provide a better experience for everyone through a simpler, more joined-up way for the whole school community to work together. If you're a teacher or school leader looking to learn more about how you can consistently use technology to improve your teaching and learning strategies and classroom management, you've come to the right place. Welcome to our very first episode. I'm your host, Rob Eastman from Firefly Learning. I've been with Firefly for 8 years, but was previously a Director of Studies at a school in the UK, and I have a background teaching science and leading the use of IT in schools. In this bite-sized episode, I'll be talking about school reports and how you can simplify the reporting process. So let's start with the question, what is the purpose of school reports? Now, traditionally, we've thought of reports as a way to keep parents updated about their child's progress and to keep lines of communication open between the home and the school. In conjunction with parents' evenings, they can sometimes be the main points of contact between the teacher and parents. But with the recent changes to the national curriculum, school reporting has become confusing. Teachers have to try and understand it and write reports in a way that's easy for parents to understand and doesn't make the school and home communications processes even more complicated. But we have to ask ourselves, just how successful are we being in this regard? And are reports still fit for purpose? To answer those questions, let's take a closer look at reports themselves. Now, school reports can fall into two main categories, formative and summative. And some of you, I have no doubt, are absolutely aware of this, but let's go into it in a little bit more detail. Formative reporting goes on for most of the year and is often in the form of grades and feedback for specific pieces of work, for example, or activities in the class. And this is very much focused on the idea of ongoing progress and development. We want to let the student know where they are, but also what they need to do next. But at the moment, this type of reporting is not always shared effectively with parents. We're pretty good at letting parents know what homework a child has to do, but maybe we're not so open about the grades and the feedback that that child is getting. And sometimes that's because we're worried about how the parents are going to react. But when we think of reports, we tend to think of summative, end-of-term or end-of-year reports. These traditionally provide a roundup of the activities of a student and their progress and grades to that date. These are often the sorts of things that we share with parents, but we share them maybe, again, just once or twice a year. And these are notoriously stressful for teachers as they try to get assessments and reports written for, let's be honest, their dreaded deadlines, and they're trying to summarize 20 plus weeks of a student's learning journey into just a few sentences. It is a challenge, it is time consuming. I know when I was teaching, I worked out the maths and I could spend 20 days a year writing reports. And this is surely not a good use of anyone's time. 20 days a year. I could spend that doing planning, I could spend that supporting my students, I could even spend that with my feet up, having a cup of tea and recharging my batteries, getting ready to go into the classroom and engage my students fully. So maybe we need to ask ourselves again, what are these school reports for? Yes, we want to keep parents updated about their child's progress and to keep lines of communication open between the home and the school, but is a once or twice a year report going to do this? And even more importantly, where does the student fit into all of this? Because surely the most important process in the person in the process is the student. They're the ones that need to act on what the report says. And crucially, they need to have the time and the support to be able to do this. So this being the case, there are some things that we need to keep in mind. We need to give students time to reflect on their report and the progress that they've made. Encourage them to think about what they've learned and how they've learned it, and then to plan the next steps in their learning. Provide them with questions and tools to help them reflect effectively on their learning, and then support them as they take those steps moving forward. Now, to do this, we need to think about the language that we're using. We need to use the language of learning to provide effective feedback. Take a step away from reporting based mainly on percentages, marks and grades, towards reporting, which includes capturing student achievement and using descriptors of not only performance but also of effort. If we adopt a growth mindset, then actually it's not the outcome that is important, it is the journey the student is making towards that outcome and the effort and progress that they are making that really counts for them. I think we also need to provide information on a broad range of achievement, not just the academic results. When we can, recognise and reward student successes across the many aspects of the learning experience. And don't forget, this is not just confined to the classroom. We need to share this information with parents so that they can be part of the conversations as well. This helps to keep the students motivated and engaged in their learning. And motivation and engagement are the crucial backbone to successful teaching and learning. Now, this sounds like a lot of work, so we need to find ways to simplify the process. Simplify the process for teachers so that they're not spending hours and days writing reports, but also simplify the process for students and parents so that they can get hold of the information in those reports quickly, simply, and at the right time. So to start with, let's ask ourselves the question, why do reports follow their existing format? And some of this is because of the sheer logistics of reporting. If we think about 20 days to write reports, you can't do that process on a continuous, ongoing basis. But changes in the way that schools are using technology have provided us with opportunities that just were not available 20 years ago. To be honest, not even 10 years ago. Technology means that reporting can now become an extension to teaching and learning. It can have a more significant role to play in the learning process. So an LMS, for example, helps schools to keep track of feedback, grades and reports, and it can do that all in one place. This makes it much simpler for students to review and reflect on their learning journey, whilst a connected parent portal, for example, can help to provide greater visibility to parents. Everything is brought into one place, it's accessible, it's trackable, and you can go back and reflect and review it across the course of the year. And in this way, the day-to-day feedback that students receive can form the backbone of reporting and can be shared with students and parents in a timely manner. And with a timely manner, that means they can actually do something about it. It isn't just, here is where you are and let's move on. It's, here is where you are, this is what we need to do next in order to go further on that journey, and we can do that together now. Students have the feedback they need to understand how to improve, and parents can see how they can support their children. Remember, learning takes place in a whole variety of places. It's not just in the classroom. It might be assignments at home, it might be revision, it might be learning at the weekend, putting that learning that they've experienced in school into action with their day-to-day lives at the weekend. This form of continuous reporting means that it's also not an added burden for teachers, but it simply makes greater use of their day-to-day activity. And it also means that conversations with parents are far more constructive, as everyone has the same information as the starting point for that discussion. So however we decide to implement continuous reporting, there are some simple tips that help us to make it more effective. To start with, remember who your audience is and use simple, jargon-free language. As a teacher, I know I was as guilty as the next person of using what we might call teacher speak, and I understood it, my colleagues understood it, but parents, 9 times out of 10, would get confused by it. And students, well, it simply cluttered the conversation that we were having and made it harder for them to engage with it and learn from it. So if you can, bear in mind who your audience is and keep it simple. Be precise with your feedback. Statements like, she's done a good job, for example, they're just too vague. How have they done a good job? Why is it a good job? Where can they go further to make it an even better job? These statements are not clear enough and don't provide any concrete ways to improve. So be more specific. That means that students get to know exactly what they need to do next. And to clarify that, use examples wherever possible so that students and parents know what success looks like. You do, You know what you're measuring them against, and you know what an ideal piece of work might resemble. And most exam boards will have exemplars that you can show, or you might have exemplars from previous years. Mark schemes can be really useful in this regard because it gives them a really clear idea of this is what you're going to be measured against. These may be the key statements and phrases that you need to put in there. So get those examples and share them with students and with parents because it sets those expectations and makes it easier for the students to be successful. Continuous congratulations are very tempting to put in place. It makes everyone feel good about themselves, but they do start to lose their impact over time, and they can give students a false sense of security. We need to be realistic, so make sure you use a combination of constructive criticism alongside that praise, because that way the student knows where they are, they're realistic in their current position, they're realistic in where they want to go next, but also they're motivated because the praise that's there, remember, we're focusing on the process and the progress that they have made. Wherever you can, feed forward. Feed forward is a term which has become quite popular in schools, but it means that what we're not doing is just reflecting on the journey that they've made, but we're trying to include concrete steps that the students can take in order to make that further process. And finally, personalize your feedback so that targets and actions are specific to the individual. Now, this does take some time, but schools that we work with, for example, they provide all of their feedback in audio format. So they'll read through an essay and they'll literally comment on that essay as they're reading it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be real time to all intents and purposes. The key thing is the teacher is hearing your reaction and your response to their piece of work. Now, this particular school then gets the students to annotate their own work. So they mark up their work whilst they're listening to the feedback. They're able to reflect on the progress they're made because they're getting that from the teacher, but they are responsible for actually deciding what their next steps are going to be. And they can do that in a way that is personal to them, but it's also something that they're doing in conjunction with their teacher. So we know that students never stop learning. So why do we limit reports to once or twice a year? Good reporting can make a real difference to learner outcomes. So isn't it time we took a look at the way we use reports and see if we can't make the process simpler for teachers and more useful for students and parents? Now that's all for this episode. It's short and sweet, and we hope you found the bite-sized information that we've discussed today and the advice that we've provided useful. If you want to find out more about reporting, and particularly continuous reporting, we've got a guide to help you which is linked in this podcast description, and it's free for you to download. So do take a look at it, and if you've got any questions or you'd like to talk to us further, then you're always free to contact us hi@fireflylearning.com. Thanks very much for your time today, and hope to see you at our next podcast in a few weeks' time. Thanks, everyone.